The first snowfall of November arrived before sunrise, covering the lonely valley in a blanket of silent white. The people of Ash Creek believed snow had a way of hiding sins. Blood disappeared beneath it. Footprints vanished overnight. Secrets became easier to keep. But not every secret stayed buried forever. A lone rider emerged from the morning mist, his dark horse moving at an unhurried pace along the frozen road. He wore a weathered black coat dusted with snow, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes, and a revolver resting quietly at his side. His face carried the kind of scars that only years of hardship could carve. No one in town recognized him. The rider stopped outside the small church, where an old bell rang softly in the winter wind. He looked at the wooden cross standing above the roof for a long moment before continuing toward the center of town. Inside the Black Lantern Saloon, the morning crowd fell silent as he stepped through the swinging doors. Conversations died instantly. Cowboys, miners, and ranch hands watched the stranger with cautious eyes. The bartender wiped a glass. "Passing through?" he asked. The stranger removed his gloves slowly. "Maybe." His voice was calm, but there was something heavy behind it. Something broken. The bartender poured coffee without asking. "You'll find trouble if you stay too long." The stranger looked around the room. "I've been finding trouble my whole life." A few men laughed quietly. One man didn't. At the far end of the bar sat Deputy Cole Mercer, the youngest lawman in Ash Creek. He studied the stranger carefully. There was something familiar about him, though he couldn't explain why. "You got a name?" Cole asked. The stranger met his eyes. "Elias." "Last name?" "It doesn't matter anymore." The room became quiet again. Outside, church bells rang once, then twice. Suddenly, the front door burst open. A terrified teenage boy stumbled inside, his boots covered in mud and snow. "They took her!" Everyone turned. "They took Sarah." The bartender frowned. "Slow down, Ben." Ben struggled to catch his breath. "The Red Wolves. They raided Miller Ranch before dawn, burned the barn, killed Mr. Miller, and kidnapped Sarah." Panic spread across the saloon. The Red Wolves. Everyone knew the name. For 3 years, the outlaw gang had terrorized the frontier, robbing stagecoaches, burning farms, and murdering anyone who resisted. They never stayed in one place long enough for the law to catch them. Sheriff Thomas Graves entered moments later, snow still clinging to his shoulders. He listened quietly, then removed his hat. "I'm sorry, Ben." Ben stared in disbelief. "Sorry? We don't know where they went." "So that's it?" The sheriff looked away. "No posse, no rescue." "We'd only lose more men." Anger filled the room, but no one argued. Everyone knew he was right. The Red Wolves had already buried too many fathers, brothers, and sons. One by one, the townspeople lowered their eyes. Everyone except Elias. He stood slowly. "Which direction?" Ben pointed toward the northern mountains. "They crossed Black Ridge." Sheriff Graves stepped forward. "Sit down." Elias didn't move. "You don't know what you're walking into." "No," Elias answered quietly. "But they don't know what's coming either." The sheriff blocked the doorway. "I can't let you ride alone." Elias looked directly into the old lawman's eyes. "You can't stop me." For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Sheriff Graves stepped aside. "Then may God ride with you." Elias pulled on his gloves, adjusted the revolver at his hip, and walked back into the falling snow. Behind him, the entire town watched through the frosted windows as the mysterious stranger mounted his horse and disappeared toward Blackridge. No one noticed the faded silver badge hidden beneath his coat, and no one knew that Elias wasn't chasing the Red Wolves for justice. He was chasing a ghost from his own past. The wind grew colder as Elias climbed the narrow trail toward Blackridge. Snow drifted across the mountainside, erasing fresh tracks almost as quickly as they were made. Most men would have turned back before reaching the first bend. Elias didn't. He leaned forward in the saddle, studying every broken branch, every hoofprint hidden beneath the snow. Years ago, tracking outlaws had been his profession. Now it was simply the only thing he had left. Near noon, he found the first sign. A piece of blue fabric hung from a thorn bush. He climbed down from his horse and picked it up. It matched the color of Sarah Miller's dress. She had left it there on purpose. A signal. Smart girl, Elias whispered. A few yards farther, he found another clue, a leather saddle strap, sliced cleanly with a knife. Someone had cut it deliberately, hoping it would slow the gang if they returned this way. Sarah wasn't waiting to be rescued. She was fighting. Elias smiled for the first time in years. By sunset, the mountains became dangerously quiet. No birds, no wolves, only the sound of wind scraping across frozen rocks. That silence bothered him. Animals always sensed danger before people did. He slid his rifle from its saddle holster. A second later, bang! A rifle shot echoed through the valley. The bullet struck a tree inches from his head. Elias threw himself behind a boulder as two more shots cracked through the air. Someone had been waiting. He spotted a flash of movement high above. A sniper. Elias remained perfectly still. The shooter fired again. Another miss. This time, Elias saw the puff of smoke rising behind a cluster of pine trees. He took a slow breath. One shot. One chance. He raised his rifle, pulled the trigger. The mountain echoed. Silence followed. Then a body tumbled down the snowy slope. Elias climbed carefully toward the fallen gunman. The man wore a grey coat with a red wolf stitched onto the shoulder. The gang had scouts watching every trail. Searching the body, Elias found a folded map marked with several camps hidden throughout the mountains. One location had been circled twice. Raven Pass, that was where they were heading. Before leaving, Elias noticed something else. Around the scout's neck hung a silver coin engraved with the image of a wolf. His expression darkened. He had seen that coin before, many years ago. As darkness settled over Black Ridge, Elias built no fire. Smoke could betray his position. Instead, he wrapped himself in his coat, beneath a rocky ledge, and studied. The map under the pale moonlight. The Red Wolves were organized. Too organized. This wasn't the work of ordinary bandits. Someone with military experience had trained them. Someone disciplined, someone dangerous. Just as he folded the map away, he heard footsteps crunching through the snow. Soft. Careful. Not the careless walk of an outlaw. Elias drew his revolver and stepped into the shadows. A hooded figure approached his camp with trembling hands raised. Please, a woman's voice whispered. Don't shoot. Elias lowered the revolver only slightly. The stranger pulled back her hood. It was Sarah. Her face was bruised. Her wrists were bleeding from broken ropes. But her eyes still burned with determination. I escaped, she said, struggling to catch her breath. They'll be hunting me soon. Before Elias could answer, a long wolf howl echoed through the mountains. Then another. And another. Sarah's face turned pale. They're not real wolves, she whispered. They use the howls to signal each other. Elias looked toward the dark forest. Tiny lantern lights began appearing between the trees. 1, 3, 5, then 10. The red wolves had already surrounded them. Sarah's breathing became shallow as the lantern lights drifted. Silently through the trees, they found us, she whispered. Elias calmly counted the lights. 1, 5, 9, 12. Too many. The red wolves were closing in from every direction, their signals echoing through the forest like the cries of wild animals. Anyone unfamiliar with the mountains would believe wolves were hunting. But these predators carried rifles. Elias grabbed a handful of snow and rubbed it over the campfire's dying embers until every spark disappeared. Darkness swallowed them. Stay behind me, he said quietly. Sarah shook her head. I'm not hiding anymore. She picked up the rifle Elias had taken from the scout. He looked at her with surprise. You know how to shoot. My father taught me before they killed him. There wasn't time for another question. A voice echoed through the trees. Elias Kane. Elias froze. Sarah looked at him. You never told me your last name. He didn't answer. Only 3 people still alive knew that name. Whoever stood outside had known him long before Ash Creek. The voice laughed. You've gotten older, but you're still impossible to kill. Another lantern appeared between the pines. Then another. Slowly, armed riders emerged from the darkness, their horses snorting clouds of white breath into the icy air. There were 15 of them. Every man wore the red wolf emblem. Their leader stepped forward, a tall outlaw with a scar across his left eye. He smiled. "I was hoping you'd come." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Where's your boss?" The outlaw chuckled. "You'll see him soon enough." He raised one hand. "Take them alive." The forest exploded into chaos. Gunfire shattered the silence. Bullets tore through tree trunks as Elias shoved Sarah behind a fallen log. He fired twice. One outlaw fell from his horse. Sarah squeezed the trigger. Another rider spun from the saddle and crashed into the snow. "Nice shot," Elias said. "I told you my father taught me." The gang scattered, trying to surround them. Elias noticed something strange. They weren't trying to kill him. They were herding him, forcing him toward the narrow canyon behind the ridge. A trap. He grabbed Sarah's arm. "This way!" They sprinted through the trees as bullets snapped past their heads. Behind them, the outlaws shouted, "Don't let him escape!" Suddenly, the ground disappeared beneath Sarah's feet. She screamed. The snow-covered earth collapsed into a hidden ravine. Elias lunged forward and caught her wrist just before she vanished into the darkness. She dangled above a 30-foot drop. "I can't hold on," she cried. "You will." 3 riders burst through the trees, rifles raised. Elias had only one free hand. His revolver lay empty. The riders smiled. "It ends here." Without warning, boom! A deafening explosion echoed across the mountains. The hillside trembled violently. Snow broke loose from the cliffs above. One outlaw looked up in horror. "Avalanche!" A roaring wall of snow thundered down the mountain, swallowing horses, trees, and gunmen alike. Elias pulled Sarah upward with every ounce of strength he had. The avalanche was only seconds away. Together, they scrambled onto solid ground and ran as the frozen mountain crashed behind them, burying the canyon beneath tons of snow. When the world finally became quiet again, the red wolves were gone, or so it seemed. As Elias caught his breath, he noticed fresh footprints leading away from the avalanche. Only one man had escaped, and beside those footprints lay something half buried in the snow. An old silver sheriff's badge, with the name Elias Kane engraved across the front. The wind howled across the mountains as Elias knelt beside the silver badge. For a long moment he simply stared at it. Snow gathered on the worn metal, but he didn't brush it away. Sarah stepped closer. "Is it really yours?" Elias picked it up carefully. The engraving was faded, but still readable. "Deputy Marshal Elias Kane." He closed his hand around it. "I buried this years ago." Sarah frowned. "Then how did it end up here?" "Someone wanted me to find it." His voice carried no fear, only certainty. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. Someone from his past knew he was coming. They continued toward Raven Pass before sunrise. The avalanche had erased every trail, making it impossible for the remaining outlaws to track them. For the first time since escaping, Sarah asked the question she'd been holding back. "Who are you, really?" Elias kept his eyes on the trail. "I used to be a deputy marshal." "Used to?" "I hunted gangs across 5 territories." She looked surprised. "Then why leave?" His jaw tightened. "Because one day I failed." Silence settled between them. He finally spoke again. "There was another gang, bigger than the Red Wolves. I was supposed to protect a town. I arrived too late. They burned everything. My wife." His voice cracked. "And my little boy." He couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah understood. She said nothing more. Some wounds were too deep for words. By midday, they reached an abandoned mining village. Broken carts lay frozen beneath the snow. Windows were shattered. Doors hung from rusted hinges. It looked as though everyone had vanished overnight. Elias raised his hand. "Something's wrong." The town was too quiet. Even the wind seemed to avoid it. Then they heard it, a weak cry for help. It came from inside the old general store. Sarah pointed. "There." They entered cautiously. Behind the counter lay an elderly man, badly wounded. His breathing was shallow. He looked up with tired eyes. You're not with them." Elias knelt beside him. "Who did this?" "The Red Wolves." The old man coughed violently. "They've turned Raven Pass into a fortress." "How many?" "More than 50. Sarah's face turned pale. 50. The old man nodded. They're waiting for someone. Elias exchanged a glance with Sarah. They're waiting for me. The old man reached into his coat with trembling hands. Elias instinctively grabbed his wrist. It's all right. The man pulled out a folded piece of paper. He told me to give you this if you ever came. Who? The old man's eyes filled with fear. The man who leads them. Elias unfolded the note. Only one sentence was written. You've spent 10 years chasing ghosts. Now come meet the one you couldn't kill. There was no signature, only the drawing of a wolf. Elias folded the paper slowly. I know exactly who wrote this. Sarah looked at him. Who? Before Elias could answer, a church bell suddenly rang outside. Once, twice, 3 times. The abandoned town had no church, no people. No one should have been there. Elias rushed outside with his revolver drawn. Standing in the middle of the empty street, completely alone, was a little boy, barefoot, wearing clothes from another time. He looked no older than 8. Ethan, Elias whispered. The color drained from his face. It was the name of his son, the son who had died 10 years ago. The boy slowly smiled, then pointed toward the mountains, and vanished into the falling snow. For several seconds, Elias couldn't breathe. The snow drifted across the empty street, erasing the small footprints almost as quickly as they had appeared. He stood frozen, staring at the place where the little boy had vanished. Ethan, he whispered again. Sarah hurried to his side. What happened? Who was that? Elias didn't answer immediately. His eyes searched every doorway and rooftop, but the street was empty. It looked like my son. Sarah frowned. I thought you said he died. He did. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled as he slipped the old Marshal's badge back into his coat. There are no ghosts, he said quietly. Only people who know how to play with a man's mind. Sarah looked toward the mountains. So whoever leads the Red Wolves knows your past. They know far too much. The wounded old man called from inside the store. You don't have much time. Elias and Sarah rushed back. The old man's breathing had become weaker. There's a tunnel. He pointed toward an old mining map hanging on the wall. Beneath Raven Pass. Elias studied the faded map. An abandoned silver mine stretched beneath the mountains. Most of its tunnels had collapsed years ago, but one narrow passage led directly under the outlaw camp. If this map is right, Elias said, we can enter without being seen. The old man nodded. He'll never expect you. From below. Before Elias could ask another question, the old man's hand fell limp. He was gone. Sarah gently closed his eyes. He died helping strangers. No, Elias replied softly. He died giving us a chance. As evening approached, they followed the map toward the entrance of the abandoned mine. The opening was hidden behind frozen vines and thick layers of snow. Inside, the air was cold and damp. Every sound echoed endlessly through the darkness. Elias lit a small lantern. The tunnel walls glittered with traces of old silver, untouched for decades. Stay close, he warned. The deeper they walked, the narrower the passage became. Suddenly,
crack.
The wooden support beams groaned. Dust rained from the ceiling. Sarah looked up nervously. Is this place safe? No. Then why are we still walking? Because the men above are even more dangerous. After nearly an hour underground, they reached a heavy iron door. It was locked from the other side. Elias noticed fresh boot prints in the dust. Someone had used this tunnel recently. He pressed his ear against the metal. Voices. Several men were talking. The boss says Kane must reach the cabin alive. Another laughed. After 10 years, he finally came back. Think the boss will really tell him the truth? He deserves to know. Elias exchanged a glance with Sarah. The truth, she whispered. Before he could answer, a loud metallic click echoed behind them. They spun around. The tunnel entrance had been sealed by a thick iron gate. Trapped. Hidden speakers carved into the rock suddenly carried a familiar voice through the darkness. Calm, cold, confident. Welcome back, Elias. Elias clenched his fists. I've been waiting a long time for this. Sarah whispered, You know him. Elias's eyes narrowed. I know that voice. The unseen man chuckled. You've spent 10 years believing you lost everything in that fire. A long silence followed. Then the voice spoke again. But what if I told you your son never died? Sarah stared at Elias in shock. Elias's heart pounded as memories he had buried for a decade came rushing back. Was this another cruel trick? Or had his entire life been built on a lie? The words echoed through the tunnel long after the voice fell silent. Your son never died. Elias stood motionless. His grip tightened around the revolver until his knuckles turned white. Sarah looked at him with concern. Don't listen to him, she said softly. He's trying to break you. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. I buried my wife. He opened them again. But I never saw my son's body. The memory struck him like a bullet. 10 years earlier, flames had swallowed the small frontier town of Red Hollow. Smoke had covered the streets, buildings collapsed, and dozens of innocent people died before the marshals could stop the attack. Elias had found his wife's body, but Ethan, only his small wooden horse had been recovered from the ashes. Everyone assumed the boy had perished in the fire. Everyone, the cold voice returned. You've asked yourself the same question every night for 10 years. What if he survived? Elias looked toward the darkness. Show yourself. The man laughed. Not yet. You haven't earned the answers. The tunnel suddenly shook. Heavy gears began turning inside the mountain. The iron gate behind them slowly lifted. You have one path forward now, the voice continued. Follow it. If you survive, we'll finally meet again. Silence returned. Only the distant drip of water echoed through the mine. Elias and Sarah followed the only open passage. The tunnel climbed higher beneath Raven Pass until faint daylight appeared ahead. They carefully peered through a crack in the rocks. Below them lay the Red Wolves' hidden camp. Sarah gasped. The old man's estimate had been wrong. There weren't 50 outlaws. There were nearly 100. Cabins surrounded a massive bonfire. Armed guards patrolled wooden watchtowers. Crates of rifles and ammunition filled the center of the camp. This wasn't merely a gang. It was an army. Elias studied every corner of the camp. Then his eyes stopped on a large black cabin, standing alone at the far end. 2 guards stood outside its door. No one goes in, Sarah whispered. Except the leader. Elias nodded. That's where we'll find our answers. As they watched, a wagon rolled into the camp carrying several frightened prisoners. Farmers, women, even children. The Red Wolves forced them to unload supplies before locking them inside a fenced enclosure. Sarah's face hardened. They're using innocent people as slaves. Elias remained silent, but inside his anger burned hotter than ever. He had seen ruthless gangs before. Never one this organized. Never one this cruel. Suddenly, a young outlaw climbed onto the central platform. The boss has an announcement. The camp grew quiet. Moments later, a tall figure stepped out of the black cabin. His face remained hidden beneath a long, dark coat and wide-brimmed hat. A man everyone believed had died during the Red Hollow massacre. Sarah noticed Elias staring. You know him? Elias's voice barely rose above a whisper. It can't be. The leader finally spoke. My friends. The time has come. Elias Kane has returned. The entire camp erupted in cheers. The leader smiled beneath the shadow of his hat. And this time, he won't leave these mountains alive. At that exact moment, the leader slowly lifted his head. Even from hundreds of feet away, his eyes locked directly onto Elias's hiding place, and he smiled. Even from a distance, his presence commanded absolute silence. He slowly removed one glove. On his right hand was a large silver ring, engraved with the image of a wolf. Elias froze. He recognized the ring years ago. It had belonged to Marshal, Victor Blackwood, the most respected lawman in the territory. Elias instinctively stepped back from the crack in the rocks. Did he see us? Sarah whispered. I don't know. But deep inside, Elias already knew the answer. The smile on the mysterious leader's face hadn't been luck. It had been recognition. As if he had expected Elias to stand in that exact spot. The camp below exploded into activity. Guards mounted their horses. Search parties spread into the surrounding forest. Hunting dogs barked as they pulled against their chains. "They're searching the mountain," Sarah said. Elias nodded. "We have minutes, maybe less." Instead of retreating, he kept watching the leader. The man stood perfectly still beside the bonfire, his long black coat swaying in the cold wind. There was something familiar about the way he carried himself, the way he walked, the way he rested one hand near his holster. Then it hit Elias like lightning. Only one man had ever taught him that stance. Marshal Victor Blackwood, the greatest lawman the frontier had ever known. His mentor, the man who had trained him to track criminals, survive ambushes and never fear death. The man Elias had once admired more than anyone else. "It can't be," he whispered again. Sarah looked confused. "You said he died." "I watched his funeral." 10 years earlier, after the Red Hollow massacre, the authorities recovered a badly burned body wearing Blackwood's Marshal badge. No one questioned it. The coffin had remained closed. Every marshal in the territory attended the funeral. Elias himself had carried the casket. If that wasn't Victor Blackwood, then whose body had they buried? A loud horn echoed through the camp. The leader raised one hand. "Bring out the prisoner." 2 outlaws dragged a wounded man onto the platform. His hands were tied behind his back. His face was bruised beyond recognition. Sarah gasped. "That's Deputy Cole!" The young lawman from Ash Creek had been captured. Cole struggled to stand. The leader walked toward him. "You followed my scouts." Cole spat blood onto the ground. "I'd do it again." The outlaws laughed. The leader remained calm. "You have courage." He slowly drew a polished revolver. "But courage without wisdom is just another way to die." He pointed the gun at Cole's head. Sarah instinctively reached for her rifle. "We have to help him!" Elias grabbed her arm. "Not yet. If we attack now, we'll all die." "But they'll kill him." Elias's face remained expressionless. Every instinct screamed at him to act. Every lesson Blackwood had ever taught him echoed in his mind. Wait for the right moment. Ironically, those lessons had come from the very man standing below. The leader lowered the revolver. Instead of firing, he smiled. "I have a better idea." He turned toward his men. "Spread the word. Tomorrow at sunrise, we're holding a public trial." The camp erupted with laughter. "A trial?" one outlaw shouted. The leader nodded. "We'll let Deputy Cole answer for the crimes of Elias Kane." Cole frowned. "What are you talking about?" The leader ignored him. "He'll be found guilty. And at noon, he'll hang." Sarah stared in disbelief. "They're blaming him for your actions." Elias's jaw tightened. "No, they're sending me a message." The leader looked directly toward the mountains again. His voice echoed across the valley. "I know you're watching, Elias. If you want to save him, come to Raven Pass. Alone. Or the rope tightens." Then for the first time, the leader removed his hat. The afternoon sun illuminated his face. Sarah covered her mouth in shock. Elias felt the blood drain from his face. There was no mistake. Standing before the Red Wolves, alive after 10 years, was Marshal Victor Blackwood. The man Elias had trusted like a father had become the most feared outlaw in the West. The world seemed to stop. Elias stared down at the camp, unable to tear his eyes away from the man standing beside the bonfire. Victor Blackwood, alive. The same sharp jawline, the same gray eyes, the same scar above his right eyebrow, the scar he had earned. Years ago, while saving Elias during a gunfight near Dry Creek, there was no doubt. It was him. Sarah broke the silence. "You trained under him?" Elias nodded slowly. "He taught me everything I know. How to track, how to shoot, how to survive." She looked back toward the camp. "Then how did a legendary marshal become the leader of the Red Wolves?" Elias had no answer. That question had haunted him from the moment Blackwood removed his hat. Below, the outlaws celebrated around the fire, convinced they had already won. Deputy Cole had been dragged into a wooden cage near the center of camp. His hands were chained, but his spirit remained unbroken. One outlaw shoved him with the butt of a rifle. Cole smiled through bloody lips. "You're all cowards." The outlaw raised his fist. Before he could strike, Blackwood spoke. "Enough." The camp fell silent. "No one touches the prisoner." The outlaw immediately stepped back. Even the most violent men in the gang obeyed him without question. Blackwood wasn't leading through fear alone. He commanded absolute loyalty. High above the camp, Elias and Sarah retreated deeper into the cave. "We can't fight 100 men," Sarah whispered. "We don't have to." Elias spread the stolen map across the rocky floor. He had studied enough military tactics to recognize weaknesses. Every fortress had one. Every army made mistakes. His finger stopped at the northern cliff. "There." Sarah leaned closer. "A supply bridge?" Elias nodded. "The only route bringing food and ammunition into the camp. If we destroy it, they lose supplies, and the confusion gives us a chance to rescue Cole." Sarah smiled. "For the first time, I actually like your plan." As night fell, they carefully climbed above the bridge. The structure stretched across a deep canyon, supported by thick wooden beams and heavy iron chains. 2 guards patrolled the entrance. Elias motioned for silence. Sarah picked up a small stone and tossed it into the darkness. Clack! 1 guard frowned. "What was that?" He walked toward the sound. The second followed. The moment both disappeared behind a large boulder, Elias moved. In seconds, he silently disarmed the first guard and knocked him unconscious. Sarah struck the second with the butt of her rifle before he could shout. Neither man fired a shot. Elias examined the bridge supports. "If we remove these pins, the whole bridge collapses." They had almost finished when a young voice echoed behind them. "Please, don't do it!" Both spun around. Standing only a few feet away was a boy, no older than 12. He wore a red wolf's jacket much too large for him. His face was dirty, his boots torn, but his eyes were filled with fear, not hatred. "If the bridge falls," the boy said, "my little sister will starve." Sarah lowered her rifle. "You live in the camp?" The boy nodded. "We're not all outlaws. Some of us are prisoners. They make us work." Elias exchanged a glance with Sarah. Everything had changed. Destroying the bridge wouldn't just hurt the gang. It would hurt innocent families trapped inside Raven Pass. Elias slowly stepped away from the support beams. "We'll find another way." The boy looked relieved. Before leaving, he quietly slipped a folded piece of paper into Elias's hand. "The boss told me to give you this, if I ever found you." Then the child disappeared into the darkness. Elias unfolded the paper. Inside was a simple drawing. A small wooden horse, the same toy Ethan had carried everywhere as a child. On the back, only 6 words were written. "He remembers you. Come alone." Elias's heart pounded. If Blackwood truly had Ethan, then this wasn't just a trap anymore. It was personal. His hands trembled. It was identical to the toy he had carved for Ethan on his son's 7th birthday. Every tiny detail was the same. The uneven front leg, the carved star on the saddle, even the small crack near its tail. No one else should have known about it. Sarah watched his expression carefully. "What is it?" Elias swallowed hard. "I made this toy with my own hands." He folded the note and placed it inside his coat. "If Blackwood knows about it, then he's been watching me for a very long time." They followed the young boy's footprints through the forest until they reached an abandoned shepherd's cabin, hidden among the pine trees. The boy was waiting outside. "My name is Noah," he said. "I know. You don't." The boy looked down. "My parents weren't criminals. The Red Wolves burned our farm 3 years ago. They gave us a choice. Join them or die." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "So you've been trapped ever since?" Noah nodded. "My little sister is sick. Blackwood promised medicine if I obeyed." Elias knelt beside him. "Does he always keep his promises?" The boy hesitated. "Sometimes." That single word told Elias everything. Inside the cabin, Noah spread a rough map across an old wooden table. "This is the camp." He pointed toward the large black cabin. "Blackwood sleeps here." Then he pointed to another building hidden behind the stables. "That's where they keep important prisoners." Sarah leaned closer. "Is Deputy Cole inside?" "Yes." Elias asked the question he feared most. "And a young man? About 18? Noah looked surprised. "There is someone. He doesn't talk much. They keep him locked away. No one knows his real name." Elias's heartbeat quickened. "Have you ever seen him?" The boy nodded slowly. He has a small scar above his left eyebrow. Elias closed his eyes. When Ethan was 6, he had fallen from a fence while chasing a stray calf. The cut above his eyebrow had left a permanent scar. Only one person in the world had that mark, his son. Before anyone could speak, a rifle shot echoed through the valley. Bang! The cabin window shattered. Glass exploded across the floor. Down! Elias shouted. Another bullet smashed into the wall, inches above Noah's head. They found us. Sarah cried. Outside, horses thundered through the trees. Voices shouted, "Surround the cabin!" No one escapes. Elias peered through the broken window. At least 20 red wolves had surrounded the clearing. Leading them was the scar-faced outlaw Elias had fought during the avalanche. He grinned. Told you we'd meet again. Elias counted his bullets. 6 in the revolver, 8 in the rifle. Not enough. Sarah noticed the rear door. We can run! Elias shook his head. They've covered every exit. Noah's face turned pale. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to lead them here. Elias placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. This isn't your fault. The scar-faced outlaw stepped forward. Blackwood has an offer. He tossed a white cloth into the cabin. Surrender, come alone, and everyone else lives. Sarah immediately shook her head. It's a lie. They'll kill us anyway. Elias remained silent. He knew Blackwood. If there was one thing his former mentor valued, it was keeping his word. Even now, the outlaw called again. You have 1 minute! The cabin fell silent. Sarah looked at Elias. What are we going to do? Elias slowly removed his marshal's badge from inside his coat. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he looked toward the door. I'll go. Sarah's eyes widened. No, if you surrender, you'll never come back. Elias gave a faint smile. Maybe, but if Blackwood truly has my son, I have to know the truth. He holstered his revolver, took one deep breath, and reached for the cabin door. Outside, the red wolves waited with rifles aimed at every window. Snow drifted through the broken glass, settling across the wooden floor like a white funeral blanket. Elias rested one hand on the doorknob. Sarah stepped in front of him. I'm not letting you do this. You don't have a choice. There has to be another way. Elias gave a faint smile. I've spent 10 years running from my past. If the truth is behind that door, I'm done running. Sarah grabbed his arm. You barely know me. Why would you risk your life? Elias looked at her calmly. Because your father died protecting you, and I failed to protect my own family. I'm not making that mistake again. He opened the door. The freezing wind hit his face instantly. 20 rifles pointed directly at his chest. The scar-faced outlaw stepped forward. You came. I said I would. The outlaw searched Elias for weapons. He found the revolver, the rifle, a hunting knife, even the small silver badge hidden beneath Elias's coat. He held it up with a laugh. The great Deputy Marshal Elias Kane. What a shame. He threw the badge into the snow. Elias didn't react. His eyes remained fixed on the distant mountains. Sarah watched helplessly from inside the cabin. Noah tugged at her sleeve. We can't let them take him. She nodded. But if we attack now, they'll kill him before we reach him. Noah looked toward the forest. There might still be a chance. The outlaws tied Elias's hands and placed him on horseback. The journey back to Raven Pass was painfully quiet. No one spoke. No one laughed. Even the horses seemed uneasy. As they approached the camp, dozens of outlaws gathered to watch. Some cheered. Others simply stared. Word had spread quickly. The legendary lawman had finally been captured. Blackwood stood outside the black cabin, waiting. His long coat fluttered in the icy wind. He dismissed every guard with a single wave of his hand. Untie him. The scar-faced outlaw hesitated. But boss, I said, untie him. The ropes were cut. Elias rubbed his wrists but made no move to escape. For a long moment, neither man spoke. 10 years. 10 years of questions. 10 years of hatred. Finally, Blackwood smiled. You've gotten older, Elias answered coldly. So have you. Blackwood laughed softly. I was beginning to think you'd never find me. I wasn't looking for you. No, you were looking for ghosts. The camp around them became silent. Every outlaw sensed this meeting was different. Blackwood slowly walked toward Elias until only a few feet separated them. You still hate me? I watched innocent people die because of you. Blackwood shook his head. No, you watched innocent people die because you trusted the wrong people. Elias frowned. What does that mean? Instead of answering, Blackwood reached into his coat. Every outlaw instinctively reached for a weapon, but Blackwood wasn't drawing a gun. He pulled out an old photograph. He handed it to Elias. Elias looked down. His heart nearly stopped. The picture showed a smiling teenage boy standing beside a river. Above his left eyebrow was the same scar Ethan had received as a child. The photograph had been taken recently, no more than a year ago. On the back were 4 handwritten words. He's waiting for you. Elias looked up, his voice barely a whisper. Where is he? Blackwood's smile disappeared. Safe. For now. Elias took 1 step forward. If you've hurt him... Blackwood interrupted. I saved him. Those 3 words hit harder than any bullet. Before Elias could respond, a loud explosion shook the entire camp. Boom! Flames erupted near the ammunition wagons. Outlaws shouted in panic. Another explosion followed, then another. Blackwood turned sharply. What happened? A terrified guard came running. Boss, we're under attack. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. By who? The guard struggled to catch his breath. It's not the army. It's not the marshals. It's someone flying your old Marshal flag. Elias looked toward the burning edge of the camp. A group of armed riders charged through the smoke. At their front rode a tall man carrying a silver badge. The stranger raised his rifle and shouted, Marshal service. Hold your ground! Elias stared in disbelief. He had never seen the man before. Yet somehow, the stranger was wearing his badge, the Marshal wearing another man's name. Smoke rolled across Raven Pass as frightened horses broke free from their ropes and raced through the camp. Men shouted in every direction. Burning wagons lit the night with bright orange flames. The Red Wolves had trained for surprise attacks, but this was different. No one expected an enemy to strike the heart of their fortress. Elias stood frozen, watching the rider carrying a silver badge high above his head. The badge looked exactly like the one that had been taken from him only moments earlier. The stranger rode straight through the burning camp with nearly 30 armed riders behind him. They moved with perfect discipline. They were not bandits. They fought like trained lawmen. Blackwood remained calm. He raised one hand and ordered his men to form defensive lines around the camp. Within seconds, the Red Wolves stopped running and took their positions behind wagons, fences and stone walls. The battle had begun. Rifle fire echoed across the valley. Bullets shattered windows and splintered wooden buildings. Smoke covered the open ground, making it difficult to see who was friend and who was enemy. Elias noticed something strange. The riders attacking the camp were not shooting at the prisoners. They were only targeting armed members of the Red Wolves. Whoever led them knew exactly where the innocent people were being held. Blackwood looked toward Elias. Stay where you are. If you run, you will die before you reach the trees. Elias did not answer. His attention stayed fixed on the mysterious Marshal. The rider finally reached the center of the camp and climbed down from his horse. He was tall and broad-shouldered. His face was partly hidden beneath a dusty hat, but his movements seemed familiar. He pulled out a revolver and fired twice. 2 Red Wolves fell before they could return fire. The stranger moved with incredible speed and confidence. Sarah and Noah suddenly appeared near the prisoner cages. They had used the confusion to sneak into the camp. Sarah quickly unlocked the cage, holding Deputy Cole. Cole stepped out, weak but determined. He picked up a fallen rifle and joined the fight without hesitation. Now 4 different groups were battling across Raven Pass. The Red Wolves, the mysterious riders, the rescued prisoners, and Elias standing between them all. Blackwood slowly turned back toward Elias. You wanted the truth. Now you are about to see it. He pointed toward the stranger wearing the silver badge. Look carefully. Elias watched as the rider removed his hat. His face became visible through the smoke. Elias felt his heart pound. The man looked almost exactly like him. The same dark hair, the same grey eyes, the same scar across the chin. It was like looking into an older mirror. Sarah stopped running when she saw him. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Deputy Cole lowered his rifle in complete shock. Even the red wolves paused for a brief moment. The mysterious Marshal looked directly at Elias. A faint smile crossed his face. Then he spoke. "My name is Daniel Kane. I am your brother." The words struck Elias harder than any bullet. He had grown up believing he was an only child. His parents had never mentioned another son. No official record had ever existed. Every memory from his childhood suddenly felt incomplete. Before Elias could speak, another rifle shot echoed across the camp. Daniel fell to one knee. Blood spread across his shoulder. A hidden sniper had found his target. The battle was far from over. Daniel pressed one hand against his wounded shoulder as blood soaked through his coat. Even though he was hurt, he refused to fall. He picked up his rifle and moved behind a broken wagon, while bullets struck the wood around him. Elias could not take his eyes off him. Every question inside his mind grew louder. How could this man be his brother? Why had no one ever spoken about him? Why had he appeared after all these years? Sarah reached Elias and pulled him behind a stone wall just as another volley of bullets crossed the camp. "You have to move. They are trying to kill both of you." Elias nodded. His thoughts were clouded, but his instincts remained sharp. He looked toward Daniel again. The man fought exactly the way Elias had been trained. Every movement was calm. Every shot was careful. Every decision showed years of experience. Only one person had trained men that way: Victor Blackwood. Blackwood watched the battle from the steps of his cabin. His expression never changed. He seemed almost pleased, as though everything was happening exactly as he had planned. A frightened outlaw ran toward him asking for orders. Blackwood simply pointed toward the eastern watchtower. "Protect the tower. Do not let anyone reach it." The outlaw immediately obeyed. Elias noticed this at once. If Blackwood wanted the tower protected more than anything else, then something important had to be inside. He turned to Sarah. "We need to reach that tower." Sarah looked across the battlefield. It was heavily guarded. "It will not be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is." They moved from cover to cover while the battle continued around them. Deputy Cole joined them after rescuing several prisoners. His face was bruised, but his determination had only grown stronger. He looked at Elias. "I knew you would come back." Elias gave a small smile. "I could not leave you behind." The three of them pushed toward the eastern side of the camp. Meanwhile, Daniel continued leading his riders through the center of Raven Pass. They fought with discipline instead of anger. Whenever they found prisoners, they set them free before moving forward. These were not men seeking revenge. They were men carrying out a mission. As Elias reached the base of the watchtower, he found the entrance locked by a heavy iron door. No guards remained outside. They had rushed into the battle. Cole forced the door open with the butt of his rifle. The narrow staircase climbed high above the camp. They hurried upward. At the top, they expected to find a sniper. Instead, they found a small room. There was no weapon, no lookout, only a wooden desk, an old lantern, and dozens of thick files stacked neatly across the floor. Elias picked up the nearest file. His name was written across the front. Inside were reports covering almost 20 years. Every town he had visited, every outlaw he had captured, every mission he had accepted. Someone had secretly recorded his entire life. Sarah opened another file. This one carried her name. It contained details about her family, photographs, letters, even records from before she was born. Cole found another cabinet. It held hundreds of files on people from every frontier town. Blackwood had not built an outlaw gang. He had built an intelligence network. Before anyone could understand why, a slow clap echoed from the doorway. Blackwood stood there alone. His revolver rested calmly in his hand. His eyes moved across the room. Then he smiled. "You finally found the truth, but you still have no idea what game you have been playing." He stepped aside. Someone else walked into the room. A young man about 18 years old. He had dark hair, gray eyes, and a small scar above his left eyebrow. Elias forgot to breathe. The young man looked directly at him, then quietly spoke.
"Father,
The room fell completely silent. The young man looked at him with calm grey eyes. The scar above his left eyebrow was exactly where Ethan had received it as a child. Time had changed his face, but not enough to hide who he was. Elias slowly stepped forward. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "Ethan." The young man nodded. "I remember that name." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Sarah and Cole watched in complete silence. Years of pain, loss, and unanswered questions filled the small room. Elias reached out with a shaking hand. He gently touched the side of Ethan's face. "You are alive." Ethan gave a small smile. "I never stopped being alive. I only stopped being with you." Tears filled Elias' eyes for the first time in many years. "I searched for you. Every town, every trail, every rumor. I never gave up." Ethan lowered his head. "I know. Blackwood told me." Elias looked toward Blackwood. His voice became hard again. "Then tell me everything." Blackwood remained calm. 10 years ago, Red Hollow was attacked. Your enemies wanted your family dead. Your son survived the fire. I found him before anyone else." Elias clenched his fists. "Then why did you take him from me?" "Because if I had returned him to you, he would have died within a week." The room became silent again. Blackwood continued. "The men who destroyed Red Hollow were not ordinary outlaws. They belonged to a powerful organization. They believed your bloodline had to disappear forever. I could protect Ethan only by making the world believe he was dead." Elias struggled to believe what he was hearing. "You expect me to trust you after all this?" "No." "I expect you to listen." Blackwood walked to the old desk and placed a faded map on top of it. Several frontier towns were marked with red circles. These towns were all destroyed during the last 20 years, not by the Red Wolves. By the same hidden organization. Every attack had been blamed on bandits. Every witness had disappeared. Every investigation had been closed. Sarah stared at the map. "Someone has been controlling everything." Blackwood nodded. "Exactly. The Red Wolves were never my true mission. They were my cover." Cole frowned. "Then why attack innocent farms?" Blackwood looked at him. "Some attacks were real. Some were staged. The real criminals hid behind every story until no one could separate truth from lies." Elias looked at Ethan. "Did you know all this?" Ethan nodded slowly. "I was raised to survive. I was trained to fight. Every day I hoped the truth would finally reach you." Before Elias could answer, a loud explosion shook the tower. The floor trembled beneath their feet. Dust poured from the ceiling. A frightened rider rushed upstairs. His face was covered in blood. He could barely speak. "They are here." Blackwood's expression changed for the first time. "Who?" The rider swallowed hard. "The Iron Circle." Blackwood closed his eyes for one brief moment. Then he looked at Elias. "Now you understand. The real enemy has finally arrived." Outside the tower, dozens of black flags appeared through the smoke. An army much larger than the Red Wolves surrounded Raven Pass from every direction. The battle that had seemed impossible only minutes earlier was only the beginning. The black flags moved through the snow like a dark wave. Hundreds of riders surrounded Raven Pass from every direction. Their horses wore black armor. Their faces were hidden beneath dark masks. Not one of them spoke. The only sound was the steady beat of hooves. Elias looked through the tower window. There were far too many. Even if every member of the Red Wolves joined the fight, they would still be badly outnumbered. Sarah whispered. "This is an army." Blackwood nodded. "Yes, and they have been preparing for this day for many years." The first line of black riders stopped just outside the camp. Then another line formed behind them. Then another. Their discipline was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. No shouting, no panic, only perfect order. A single rider slowly moved to the front. His horse was larger than the others and covered in black leather armor. The rider wore a long black coat that reached almost to the ground. A silver mask hid his face. Everyone watched as he raised one hand. The entire army stopped at the exact same moment. Blackwood looked at Elias. "That is their commander. He never shows his face. No one even knows his real name." Elias studied the silent figure. Something about the commander felt familiar. He could not explain why. The commander pulled out a rolled piece of paper. One of his soldiers carried it into the camp beneath a white flag. The messenger stopped in front of Blackwood. Without saying a word, he handed over the paper and rode away. Blackwood opened it. His face became serious. Sarah asked, "What does it say?" Blackwood handed the letter to Elias. The message was short. "Surrender Ethan Kane before sunset. If you refuse, everyone in Raven Pass dies." There was no signature, only the symbol of a black circle. Elias folded the letter. "They want my son." Blackwood nodded. "They have wanted him since the day he was born." Cole looked confused. Why would an entire army hunt one man? Blackwood answered quietly, "Because of who his mother was." Elias looked at him in surprise. "You never told me anything about her." Blackwood lowered his eyes. "Because I promised her I never would." Before anyone could ask another question, a loud horn echoed across the valley. The Black Army began moving forward. Rows of archers stepped ahead of the cavalry. They raised their bows together. Blackwood shouted, "Take cover!" Thousands of arrows filled the sky. They fell like a storm over Raven Pass. Wooden roofs shattered. Windows exploded. Men and horses cried out across the camp. The first attack lasted less than a minute. When it ended, the ground was covered with broken arrows, smoke, and fallen bodies. Elias looked around. The battle had changed. This was no longer a fight between lawmen and outlaws. It had become a war for survival. Then Ethan stepped forward. His voice was calm. "If they only want me, then I should surrender." Elias turned toward his son. "No, I just found you. I am not losing you again." At that moment, a second horn echoed through the valley. The commander in the silver mask slowly removed one glove. On the back of his hand was a mark Elias had seen only once before, on the man who murdered his wife 10 years ago. Elias felt his heart fill with rage. For the first time in a decade, the killer was standing only a few hundred yards away. Elias could not look away from the silver mask. The mark on the commander's hand was burned into his memory. 10 years earlier, he had seen the same mark through the flames of Red Hollow. It was the last thing he remembered before the burning roof collapsed around him. He had searched for that mark ever since. Now it stood only a short distance away. His anger rose like fire inside him. Sarah saw the change in his face. "Do not let your anger decide for you." Elias took a slow breath. "I've waited 10 years for this moment." Blackwood stepped beside him. "That is exactly what the commander wants. He wants you to lose control." Elias looked at Blackwood. "Then tell me who he is." Blackwood shook his head. "I do not know his real name. No one does. Every person who learns his identity disappears. The only thing I know is that he has led the Iron Circle for more than 20 years. He never leaves witnesses behind." Below the tower, the first line of black soldiers moved closer. They carried large wooden shields and marched together without fear. Behind them came more archers. The second attack was about to begin. Blackwood turned to his men. "Protect the prisoners first. Forget the supplies. Forget the buildings. Save the people." The Red Wolves obeyed without question. For the first time, Elias saw them, helping frightened families instead of hiding behind them. Outlaws carried children to safety. Women were led into the old mine tunnels. The lines between good and evil became harder to see. Deputy Cole watched in silence. "Everything I believed about this gang was wrong." Blackwood answered without looking at him. "Not everything. Some of these men have done terrible things. Some cannot be forgiven. But many joined because they had nowhere else to go. The Iron Circle destroyed their homes. I gave them a place to survive." A loud horn echoed again. The Black Army charged. Hundreds of riders rushed toward Raven Pass. Gunfire exploded across the valley. Smoke covered the battlefield. Elias grabbed his rifle and joined the defenders. Sarah fought beside him. Cole protected the families moving toward the tunnels. Daniel, despite his wounded shoulder, stood with the front line. The battle became fierce. Men fell on both sides. The sound of rifles mixed with the cries of frightened horses. Then Elias saw something that made his blood run cold. A group of black soldiers had slipped around the edge of the camp. They were not attacking the defenders. They were heading straight for the tower, straight toward Ethan. Elias shouted for everyone to fall back. He ran as fast as he could. The soldiers reached the tower entrance first. The heavy door burst open. Blackwood and Ethan were still inside. Elias climbed the stairs 2 at a time. When he reached the top, the room was empty. The window stood open. Cold wind blew through the broken glass. A single rope hung down the outside wall. Ethan was gone. Blackwood stood beside the window. His face was filled with anger. They took him. Elias looked down. The black soldiers were already riding away, through the snow with a young prisoner tied. Across one of the horses, Elias gripped his rifle so tightly that his hand shook. He had found his son and lost him again. Far across the valley, the commander in the silver mask turned his horse. He looked back at Elias for a brief moment. Then he slowly raised one hand, not as a greeting, but as a promise. The hunt had only just begun. The moment he saw the black riders disappear into the snowy valley, he rushed down the tower stairs. Every second mattered. Every heartbeat carried Ethan farther away. Outside the camp, chaos still filled the air. Fires burned across Raven Pass. Wounded men cried out for help. Families hurried toward the mine tunnels, while defenders struggled to hold the outer walls. Sarah caught up with Elias. "Where are you going?" Elias looked toward the valley. "I'm bringing my son home." Daniel stepped forward, despite the blood still flowing from his shoulder. "You cannot chase them alone. There are too many." "Then ride with me." Blackwood walked out of the tower. His face was calm again. "No. If all of us leave now, the camp will fall. The Iron Circle wants us to follow in anger. They are leading us into another trap." Elias looked directly at him. "Maybe, but I will not lose Ethan again." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Blackwood reached into his coat and removed a small brass compass. It was old and scratched from years of use. "Take this." Elias frowned. "It belonged to your father." He carried it on every mission. Inside the compass is something only he knew. Elias opened the cover. Hidden beneath the glass was a tiny folded piece of paper. On it was a single word: North. Blackwood nodded. "There is an abandoned military fort beyond the frozen valley. If they captured Ethan, they will take him there. It is the safest place for prisoners." Daniel mounted his horse. "Then we ride north." Sarah climbed onto her horse beside Elias. Cole checked his rifle and followed. Noah ran toward them carrying a small leather bag. "Food, medicine, and extra ammunition. You will need all of it." Elias smiled. "Thank you." Noah nodded. "Bring him back." The four riders left Raven Pass at full speed. Snow flew behind their horses as they crossed the frozen valley. The wind became stronger with every mile. By sunset, they found the first sign. Fresh hoofprints. Daniel climbed down to examine them. 6 horses, 1 heavy wagon. They passed here less than an hour ago. Elias looked ahead. "We are gaining on them." They continued through the night. The moon reflected across the frozen river like silver glass. Everything was silent, too silent. Sarah suddenly raised one hand. "Stop." Everyone pulled their horses to a halt. She pointed toward the snow ahead. The tracks ended. Cole looked confused. They cannot just disappear. Daniel studied the ground carefully. Then his expression changed. "Look up." Elias slowly lifted his eyes. High above them on the cliffs stood dozens of black soldiers. Rifles pointed down from every direction. The commander in the silver mask rode to the edge of the cliff. His horse stood perfectly still against the dark sky. The commander spoke in a calm voice that carried across the valley. "You have come exactly where I wanted." The cliffs echoed with the sound of rifles being loaded. Elias counted the soldiers. There were more than 50. They were completely surrounded. Then the commander raised one hand. "Bring out the prisoner." 2 soldiers stepped forward. Between them stood Ethan. His hands were tied, but he was alive. Elias called out his name. Ethan looked toward his father. Then he shouted with all his strength, "Do not trust the fort. It is not a prison. It is where they keep the truth." Before Elias could answer, a soldier struck Ethan from behind. He fell to his knees. The commander slowly turned his horse. "Tomorrow. Come to the fort if you want your son. Come alone." Then the Black Army disappeared beyond the cliffs, leaving Elias with only one choice. The valley became silent again. Only the cold wind moved through the snow. Elias stood where he was, staring at the empty cliffs. Ethan was alive. He had seen him with his own eyes. But every minute that passed carried his son deeper into enemy territory. Sarah rode beside him. "This is exactly what they want. They want you to ride into their trap." Elias nodded. "I know." "Then promise me you will not go alone." Before Elias could answer, Daniel climbed down from his horse and examined the ground beneath the cliffs. He found something hidden beneath the snow. A small metal button. It had fallen from one of the black soldiers. Daniel turned it over. An eagle was engraved on the back. "This is not Iron Circle equipment." Cole looked at it. "Then whose is it?" Daniel frowned. "The old frontier army. They stopped using this symbol more than 20 years ago. Blackwood once told me that several army officers disappeared without a trace after the border wars." Elias looked toward the north. Maybe they never disappeared? Maybe they became the Iron Circle. No one spoke. The idea explained too many things. Their discipline, their weapons, their perfect planning. This was not a gang built by criminals. It was built by trained soldiers. They continued north until sunrise. The frozen valley slowly gave way to rocky hills covered with pine trees. Just after dawn, they reached the top of a ridge. Daniel stopped his horse. There, far below them, stood an enormous stone fortress. High walls surrounded the old military base. Watchtowers stood at every corner. Black flags flew above the gates. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys inside the walls. Sarah looked through a spyglass. There must be hundreds of soldiers inside. Cole shook his head. A direct attack would be suicide. Elias remained silent. He studied every wall, every tower, every path leading into the fortress. Then he noticed something strange. The northern wall had no guards. Not one. Daniel noticed it too. That makes no sense. Every commander protects every side. Unless, Elias finished the thought, unless they want us to enter there. It was another trap, but they needed another way in. As they searched the hills, Noah suddenly appeared from behind a group of rocks. Everyone reached for their weapons. Noah raised both hands. "Do not shoot." Sarah stared at him. "How did you find us?" "I followed your tracks." He was breathing hard from the long journey. "I know another way inside. My father helped build this fort years ago. There is an old supply tunnel beneath the eastern cliff. It was sealed after the war, but I know where the entrance is." Hope returned to the group. Noah led them through thick forest until they reached a frozen waterfall. Behind the ice was a narrow opening just large enough for one person at a time. The tunnel was dark and cold. Dust covered the floor. No footprints. No guards. It looked forgotten. Daniel lit a lantern. This tunnel has not been used for years. They walked deeper underground. After nearly an hour, they reached a heavy wooden door. Faint voices came from the other side. Elias slowly pushed the door open. They found themselves inside a huge underground room. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Thousands of files filled the walls. Maps, photographs, letters, military records. Everything had been carefully organized. Cole looked around in disbelief. This is not a prison. This is an archive. Daniel picked up one file. His face turned pale. Every file had the name of a family. Every family that had lost someone during the last 20 years. Elias reached for another file. The name on the front stopped him cold. Ethan Kane. Before he could open it, a calm voice echoed through the room. "You are finally here." The commander in the silver mask stepped out from the shadows. He was alone. He looked directly at Elias. Then he slowly removed his mask. Elias stared at the face beneath it. His entire world seemed to stop. It was someone he had buried with his own hands. The silver mask fell to the stone floor. No one spoke. Elias stared at the face before him. His heart pounded so hard that he could hear it in his ears. It was Jacob Mercer, the sheriff of Red Hollow, the man Elias had carried from the ruins after the Great Fire, the man everyone believed had died from his wounds. Sarah looked from Elias to the stranger. "You know him?" Elias nodded slowly. "He was the sheriff of my town. I buried him myself." Jacob gave a faint smile. "That was the plan." Cole stepped forward in disbelief. "Mercer, that is my family name." Jacob looked at him with quiet eyes. "I know." Cole frowned. "How do you know my name?" "Because I am your grandfather." The room fell silent. Cole could not move. His rifle slipped from his hands and landed on the stone floor. "That cannot be true." Jacob slowly reached into his coat. He removed an old pocket watch. Inside the cover was a faded picture of a young woman holding a small child. Jacob handed it to Cole. The woman was Cole's mother when she was only a little girl. Cole had seen the picture many times in his own home. His hands began to shake. "My mother always said her father died before she could remember him." Jacob lowered his head. "That is what I wanted her to believe. The Iron Circle would have hunted her if they knew she was my daughter." Elias looked at Jacob with anger. "How many lies have you told?" Jacob answered without fear. "Enough to keep innocent people alive." Daniel stepped closer. "Then tell us the truth." "All of it." Jacob walked toward the long shelves filled with files. For 30 years, the Iron Circle controlled judges, generals, businessmen, and politicians. Anyone who stood against them disappeared. Entire towns were erased from history. Families were separated. Children were taken and raised under new names. Every file in this room belongs to someone whose life was stolen. Sarah slowly looked around the endless rows of records. Thousands of lives, hidden from the world. Jacob nodded. The Iron Circle does not conquer with armies. It conquers with secrets. Elias opened the file marked with Ethan's name. Inside were school reports, medical records, training schedules, and dozens of photographs. Every year of Ethan's life had been carefully recorded. Elias turned the pages with trembling hands. He had missed every birthday, every smile, every step into adulthood. His eyes filled with tears. Jacob spoke quietly. "He never stopped asking about you. Every year he believed you would come." Elias closed the file. "Then where is he now?" Jacob pointed toward a heavy steel door at the far end of the archive. "Beyond that door, the highest level of the fortress. They are preparing to move him before sunrise." Daniel reached for his rifle. "Then we move now." Jacob raised one hand. "If you go through that door without a plan, none of you will leave alive. The fortress is filled with hidden passages, traps, and soldiers." Sarah looked at Jacob. "Will you help us?" For the first time, a look of regret crossed his face. "I have spent too many years serving the wrong people. Tonight I finally choose the right side." He reached into his pocket and removed a large iron key. "This opens every locked door inside the fortress. Take it." Elias accepted the key. At that exact moment, a loud bell echoed through the fortress. Jacob looked toward the ceiling. His expression changed. "They know you are here." Heavy footsteps thundered above them. Dozens of soldiers were rushing toward the archive. Jacob looked at Elias one last time. "There is only one way out. Follow me." He turned and disappeared into a narrow passage hidden behind the shelves. The others hurried after him. Behind them, the steel doors burst open. The hunt inside the fortress had begun. Jacob led the way through the narrow stone passage. The tunnel was dark and cold. Water dripped from the ceiling and echoed through the silence. The walls were covered with dust, showing that very few people had walked there in many years. Elias stayed close behind him. Daniel guarded the rear while Sarah and Cole watched every side passage. No one spoke. Far behind them, the sound of boots echoed through the archive. The soldiers had already discovered the hidden doorway. Jacob looked back. They will find this tunnel soon. We must keep moving. The passage twisted beneath the fortress before opening into a large underground chamber. Old wooden crates filled the room. Broken cannons rested against the walls. Rust-covered forgotten weapons from a war that had ended decades earlier. Cole looked around. This place was part of the old military fort. Jacob nodded. It was built long before the Iron Circle arrived. Very few people know it exists. Elias noticed a faded map carved into the stone wall. It showed several secret passages leading to different parts of the fortress. One path ended beneath the highest tower. Jacob pointed at it. That is where Ethan is being held. Sarah studied the map carefully. How many guards? Jacob answered without hesitation. At least 40, maybe more. Daniel smiled slightly. Then we do not fight all 40. We make sure only a few can reach us at a time. Elias looked at him. What is your plan? Daniel pointed to another tunnel on the map. This passage leads to the old bell tower. If we ring the emergency bell, every soldier in the fortress will run toward the main gate. During the confusion, we climb to the highest tower. Cole nodded. It could work. Jacob looked uncertain. It is risky. Every plan worth making is risky. They gathered what they could from the old supply room. Extra rifles, boxes of ammunition, ropes, lanterns. Everything they might need. Before leaving, Jacob handed Elias a small leather journal. This belonged to your father. He told me to give it to you if anything ever happened to him. Elias opened the first page. The handwriting was familiar. His father had written only one sentence. The truth is worth any sacrifice. Elias closed the journal and placed it inside his coat. They moved quietly through the eastern tunnel until they reached a wooden ladder leading upward. Daniel climbed first. He slowly pushed open the trapdoor. The bell tower was empty. Only the great bronze bell hung above them. Daniel tied a rope to the bell. When I pull this, we have only a few minutes. Everyone took their positions. Elias looked at each member of the group. Sarah, Cole, Daniel, Jacob. Every one of them had risked everything to help him, no matter what happens. Thank you. Sarah smiled. Bring your son home. That is all the thanks we need. Daniel pulled the rope. The great bell rang across the fortress. Its deep sound echoed through every wall. Within seconds, alarms spread through the entire fort. Soldiers shouted. Boots thundered across stone floors. Doors slammed open, exactly as Daniel had planned. The fortress was falling into confusion. Jacob pointed toward a staircase leading higher into the tower. Now, this is our chance. They hurried upward as fast as they could. One floor, then another, then another. Finally, they reached a heavy oak door bound with iron. Jacob stopped. Beyond this door is the highest chamber. Ethan is inside. Elias took a deep breath. He placed the iron key into the lock. The key turned slowly. The lock clicked open. He pushed the door inward. The room was empty. Only a single chair stood beside a window. On the chair lay a folded letter with Elias' name written across the front. Ethan was gone. Again. Then a familiar voice echoed from behind him. You are always one step behind. Elias turned. The commander of the Iron Circle stood in the doorway, with a dozen armed soldiers behind him. He smiled calmly. This time, there will be no escape. Elias stood between the empty chair and the open window. Cold air poured into the tower. A snow drifted across the wooden floor. The commander of the Iron Circle stepped into the room. 12 armed soldiers followed him. Each one raised a rifle. No one fired. The commander looked at Elias with calm eyes. You have come farther than I expected. Elias did not lower his weapon. Where is my son? Safe. For now. That answer only made Elias angrier. You have taken everything from me. My home, my wife, my family. Today it ends. The commander smiled. No, today it begins. He slowly walked toward the center of the room. His soldiers remained perfectly still. Sarah quietly moved closer to the wall. Daniel noticed another narrow doorway behind the commander. Someone had escaped through it only moments earlier. Fresh footprints crossed the dusty floor. Ethan had been there. They had missed him by only a few minutes. The commander looked at Daniel. "You are brave." "Just like your father." Daniel frowned. "You know my father." The commander nodded. "Very well. He was one of my finest officers." Daniel stared at him in disbelief. "That is impossible. My father died before I was born." The commander shook his head. "That is another lie you were told. Every person in this room has spent a lifetime believing stories that were carefully written for them." Jacob stepped forward. "Enough. You have destroyed innocent lives for decades." The commander looked at him without emotion. "History always demands a price." Jacob raised his rifle. "Not anymore." Before anyone could move, a loud whistle echoed outside the tower. One of the soldiers rushed to the window. "Sir, the southern wall has been breached." The commander looked outside. Blackwood had arrived. Hundreds of red wolves were charging through the fortress gates. Behind them rode the freed prisoners from Raven Pass. Men and women who had lost everything now fought side by side. The battle spread through the fortress. Gunfire echoed from every direction. Smoke rose above the stone walls. The commander looked back at Elias. "Your friends have courage, but courage will not save them." He reached into his coat and removed a small metal device. He pressed a hidden switch. A deep rumble shook the tower. The floor trembled beneath their feet. Dust fell from the ceiling. Jacob looked around in horror. "Explosives. He has placed explosives beneath the fortress." The commander nodded. "If I cannot keep the archive, no one will." Sarah looked toward the staircase. "We have to stop him." The commander smiled again. "You are already too late." Another explosion echoed from deep below. Part of the fortress wall collapsed into the valley. Stone and snow crashed together. Panic spread through the soldiers outside. The commander stepped backward toward the hidden doorway. "You have one choice: save your son, or save the truth hidden inside this fortress. You cannot save both." He disappeared through the doorway. The remaining soldiers opened fire. Bullets tore through the room. Elias and the others dove behind thick stone pillars. Another explosion shook the tower. Cracks spread across the walls. The fortress was beginning to collapse. Elias looked at the folded letter still resting on the empty chair. He crawled through the gunfire and grabbed it. Inside was a single sentence written in Ethan's handwriting. "I know where they are taking me. Meet me at Eagle Peak before sunrise." Elias folded the letter and looked at his friends. They had almost no time left. The fortress was falling apart around them. The final chase had begun. Elias stood between the empty chair and the open window. Cold air poured into the tower as snow drifted across the wooden floor. The commander of the Iron Circle stepped into the room. 12 armed soldiers followed him. Each one raised a rifle. No one fired. The commander looked at Elias with calm eyes. "You have come farther than I expected." Elias did not lower his weapon. "Where is my son?" "Safe. For now." That answer only made Elias angrier. "You have taken everything from me. My home, my wife, my family. Today it ends." The commander smiled. "No, today it begins." He slowly walked toward the center of the room. His soldiers remained perfectly still. Sarah quietly moved closer to the wall. Daniel noticed another narrow doorway behind the commander. Someone had escaped through it only moments earlier. Fresh footprints crossed the dusty floor. Ethan had been there. They had missed him by only a few minutes. The commander looked at Daniel. "You are brave, just like your father." Daniel frowned. "You know my father." The commander nodded. "Very well. He was one of my finest officers." Daniel stared at him in disbelief. "That is impossible. My father died before I was born." The commander shook his head. "That is another lie you were told. Every person in this room has spent a lifetime believing stories that were carefully written for them." Jacob stepped forward. "Enough! You have destroyed innocent lives for decades." The commander looked at him without emotion. History always demands a price. Jacob raised his rifle. "Not anymore." Before anyone could move, a loud whistle echoed outside the tower. One of the soldiers rushed to the window. "Sir, the southern wall has been breached." The commander looked outside. Blackwood had arrived. Hundreds of red wolves were charging through the fortress gates. Behind them rode the freed prisoners from Raven Pass. Men and women who had lost everything now fought side by side. The battle spread through the fortress. Gunfire echoed from every direction. Smoke rose above the stone walls. The commander looked back at Elias. "Your friends have courage, but courage will not save them." He reached into his coat and removed a small metal device. He pressed a hidden switch. A deep rumble shook the tower. The floor trembled beneath their feet. Dust fell from the ceiling. Jacob looked around in horror. Explosives. He has placed explosives beneath the fortress. The commander nodded. "If I cannot keep the archive, no one will." Sarah looked toward the staircase. "We have to stop him." The commander smiled again. "You are already too late." Another explosion echoed from deep below. Part of the fortress wall collapsed into the valley. Stone and snow crashed together. Panic spread through the soldiers outside. The commander stepped backward toward the hidden doorway. "You have one choice. Save your son, or save the truth hidden inside this fortress. You cannot save both." He disappeared through the doorway. The remaining soldiers opened fire. Bullets tore through the room. Elias and the others dove behind thick stone pillars. Another explosion shook the tower. Cracks spread across the walls. The fortress was beginning to collapse. Elias looked at the folded letter still resting on the empty chair. He crawled through the gunfire and grabbed it. Inside was a single sentence written in Ethan's handwriting. "I know where they are taking me. Meet me at Eagle Peak before sunrise." Elias folded the letter and looked at his friends. They had almost no time left. The fortress was falling apart around them. The final chase had begun. Large pieces of stone crashed onto the floor. Dust filled the air until it became difficult to breathe. Every explosion echoed through the fortress like rolling thunder. Elias folded Ethan's letter and placed it safely inside his coat. "We have to leave now." Jacob pointed toward a narrow stairway hidden behind the wall. "This way. It leads outside the fortress." The group hurried through the passage as the ceiling cracked above them. Behind them, another explosion tore through the tower. The room where they had been standing only moments before disappeared beneath falling stone. They reached the bottom of the passage and pushed open a heavy wooden door. Cold air rushed into their faces. The fortress courtyard had become a battlefield. Blackwood and the Red Wolves were fighting side by side with the freed prisoners. The Iron Circle soldiers were slowly falling back toward the northern gate. Smoke covered almost everything. Daniel spotted Blackwood near the main gate. He was surrounded by enemy soldiers. Without hesitation, Daniel ran toward him. Sarah and Cole followed. Elias stayed close behind. Blackwood fired his last bullet and reached for another weapon. Before he could reload, an Iron Circle soldier charged with a bayonet. Elias fired. The soldier fell into the snow. Blackwood looked at Elias and gave a silent nod. For the first time in many years, there was trust between them again. Jacob walked over carrying a torn military map. "I found this in the command room." He spread it across a broken wagon. One location was marked with a black circle, Eagle Peak. Blackwood looked at the map. That is their last stronghold. If Ethan wrote about Eagle Peak, then they are taking him there. Sarah looked toward the mountains in the distance. "How far is it?" Blackwood answered. "If we ride without stopping, we can reach it before sunrise." A frightened scout rode into the courtyard. He jumped from his horse before it had fully stopped. "The northern bridge has been destroyed. The only road to Eagle Peak is blocked." Blackwood frowned. "Then we ride through Frost Canyon." Jacob looked alarmed. "No one uses that trail. It is too dangerous. Avalanches, hidden cliffs, frozen rivers. Half the riders never come back." Elias climbed onto his horse. "Then we make sure we do." Daniel mounted beside him. "I am with you." Sarah smiled. "You were never going alone." Cole checked his rifle and nodded. "Neither are you." Blackwood looked at each of them. "This journey will decide everything. If we fail, the Iron Circle wins forever." The group left the burning fortress behind and rode into the frozen wilderness. The night grew colder with every mile. Snow covered the narrow mountain trail. The moon gave just enough light to see the path ahead. After several hours, they reached the entrance to Frost Canyon. The cliffs rose high above them like giant walls of ice. Everything was silent. Too silent. Elias slowed his horse. "Something is wrong." Before anyone could answer, a loud crack echoed across the canyon. Daniel looked up. The snow above the cliffs had begun to move. Another crack followed. Then another. Sarah whispered, Avalanche. A massive wall of snow broke loose from the mountain. It rushed toward them with terrifying speed. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Elias looked ahead and saw a narrow cave opening in the cliff. Ride. He drove his horse forward with all his strength as the mountain came crashing down behind them. Snow crashed down the mountainside with unstoppable force. Giant rocks rolled through the white wave, crushing trees and breaking everything in their path. Elias urged his horse toward the narrow cave. Faster! The entrance was only a few steps away. Sarah reached it first and disappeared inside. Cole followed close behind. Daniel turned to help Jacob, whose horse had stumbled on the icy ground. The avalanche was almost upon them. Daniel jumped from his saddle and pulled Jacob onto his own horse. Hold on. The horse leaped forward just as the wall of snow swept across the canyon. Elias felt the freezing wind strike his back. His horse lunged into the cave. A heartbeat later, the entrance vanished beneath tons of snow. Darkness surrounded them. Only the sound of heavy breathing broke the silence. Everyone was alive, for the moment. Sarah lit a lantern. The cave stretched deep into the mountain. Ancient markings covered the stone walls. Jacob ran his hand across one of them. These are not natural marks. Someone carved them long ago. Blackwood studied the symbols. Old military signs. This cave was once used as a hidden supply route. Daniel looked ahead. Then it should lead somewhere. They continued deeper into the tunnel. After nearly an hour, the passage widened into a massive underground chamber. Clear water flowed through a quiet river beneath the stone floor. Broken wooden boats rested along the shore. Cole looked around in amazement. An underground river. Jacob nodded. It flows beneath Eagle Peak. Elias looked at him. Can it take us there? If the boats still float. They inspected the old boats. Most had rotted away. Only one remained strong enough to carry them. Blackwood smiled for the first time in days. Sometimes one chance is enough. They pushed the boat into the cold water. The river carried them slowly through the darkness. The only sounds were the gentle splash of water and the distant echo of the current. Hours passed. Finally, a faint light appeared ahead. The river ended beneath a rocky cliff. They climbed out and looked around. High above them stood Eagle Peak, the tallest mountain in the region. At its summit stood an old stone monastery surrounded by black flags. Sarah stared upward. That is where they are keeping Ethan. Blackwood nodded. Yes, but something is wrong. Elias followed his gaze. Hundreds of Iron Circle soldiers stood outside the monastery, not preparing for battle, preparing for a ceremony. Large fires burned around the courtyard. Rows of soldiers stood perfectly still. At the center of the courtyard, Ethan was tied to a tall wooden post. He was alive, but he was surrounded. Daniel raised his rifle. We have to move. Blackwood stopped him. Wait, look. The commander of the Iron Circle walked onto a raised platform. He lifted both hands. The entire army knelt before him. Then he spoke in a loud, clear voice. Tonight the old bloodline ends. Tomorrow a new age begins. Elias felt a chill run through his body. This was never just about revenge. It was about something much bigger. Then the commander turned toward Ethan. He slowly drew a long ceremonial sword and raised it high into the air. The sword gleamed in the firelight. Every soldier remained perfectly still. Not a single voice could be heard across the monastery courtyard. Even the cold wind seemed to disappear. Elias watched from the rocky cliff. His heart pounded. Ethan stood tied to the wooden post, but his head remained high. Fear was visible in his eyes, yet he refused to bow. Sarah looked at Elias. We cannot wait any longer. Blackwood nodded. If we attack now, many innocent people will die. Daniel pointed toward the eastern wall of the monastery. There is another way. He raised his binoculars. A narrow stone bridge connected the monastery to the mountain behind it. Only 6 guards were protecting it. Elias studied the bridge. That is our path. Jacob unfolded the old map one last time. A forgotten stairway climbs from the river to the back of the monastery. If the map is correct, we can reach the bridge without being seen. The group moved quietly through the snow. They climbed the hidden stairway, one careful step at a time. Loose stones slipped beneath their boots. Far below them, the ceremony continued. The commander raised the sword higher. He began speaking to his followers. For generations, the Kane bloodline has stood against us. Tonight, the last survivor falls. The soldiers answered together, "Victory to the Circle." Elias felt anger rising inside him. Blackwood placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay focused. Your son needs a clear mind." "Not an angry one?" Elias took a slow breath. He nodded. They reached the stone bridge. 6 guards stood at their posts exactly as Daniel had predicted. Sarah quietly picked up a small stone and threw it into the darkness. The sound echoed behind the guards. 2 soldiers walked away to investigate. Daniel and Cole moved silently through the shadows. Within seconds, both guards were unconscious. Blackwood and Jacob rushed the remaining guards before they could shout. The fight lasted only a few moments. No alarm was raised. The bridge was clear. They crossed quickly and reached the back entrance of the monastery. The old wooden door was locked. Jacob inserted the iron key. The lock opened with a soft click. Inside, they found a long hallway lit by burning lanterns. Paintings covered the walls. Each painting showed members of the Iron Circle from different generations. Elias stopped in front of one large portrait. His eyes widened. The man in the painting looked exactly like his own father. Daniel stepped beside him. "That cannot be him." The painting was more than 30 years old. Jacob looked closely. There was a small brass plate beneath it. It read, "Founder of the Second Circle, Jonathan Kane." Elias felt the ground disappear beneath him. Jonathan Kane was his father, the man who had taught him honesty, the man he had admired all his life. Blackwood slowly lowered his head. "There is one truth I never wanted you to discover. Your father did not fight the Iron Circle. He helped create it, before anyone could speak another word." A bell rang outside. The ceremony had reached its final moment. Elias looked through the nearest window. The commander was walking toward Ethan with the ceremonial sword still in his hands. There was no more time for questions, only time to act. The bell echoed across Eagle Peak. Every soldier in the courtyard stood in perfect silence. The commander walked slowly toward Ethan. The long ceremonial sword reflected the light from the burning fires. Elias stood behind the monastery window. His heart was torn between 2 battles. One battle was for his son. The other was for the truth about his father. Sarah looked at him. "Forget the past. Save Ethan first. The truth can wait." Elias nodded. "You are right. Nothing matters until my son is safe." Blackwood stepped beside him. "There is one last passage beneath this hall. It leads directly behind the ceremony platform. No one outside knows it exists." Jacob pushed aside an old wooden shelf. A narrow stone staircase appeared behind it. The group hurried down into the darkness. The tunnel was short. After only a few minutes, they reached another hidden door. Blackwood placed his hand on the stone. "Beyond this door is the platform. Once we open it, there is no turning back." Daniel checked his rifle. "Then let us finish this." Outside, the commander stopped in front of Ethan. He looked into the eyes of the young man. "You should have joined us. You could have ruled beside me." Ethan answered without fear, "I would rather die than become like you." The commander smiled. "Then you will die with honor." He lifted the sword. At that exact moment, the hidden stone door burst open. Elias charged onto the platform. "Stop!" His voice echoed across the entire courtyard. Hundreds of soldiers turned toward him. The commander slowly lowered the sword. "I knew you would come." Elias raised his rifle. "Let him go." The commander looked almost amused. "You still believe this story is about your son?" "It never was." He pointed toward the crowd. "Look around you. Every soldier here is waiting for the same thing. The end of one bloodline, and the beginning of another." Blackwood and Daniel stepped onto the platform beside Elias. Sarah and Cole aimed their rifles from the edge of the courtyard. The commander looked at Blackwood. "Old friend, you finally chose the wrong side." Blackwood answered calmly. "No, I finally chose the right one." The commander laughed softly. "Then there is nothing left to say." He dropped the ceremonial sword. Instead, he drew 2 polished revolvers. The soldiers around the courtyard reached for their weapons. For one brief moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Then a single rifle shot echoed across Eagle Peak. No one could tell who fired first. The courtyard exploded into chaos. Gunfire filled the air. Smoke covered the platform. Soldiers rushed forward from every direction. Elias ran toward Ethan, while Daniel and Blackwood held back the first wave of attackers. Sarah fired from the monastery steps with perfect accuracy. Cole protected the narrow entrance so more soldiers could not reach the platform. Elias cut the ropes holding Ethan. Father. Ethan stepped free just as another bullet struck the wooden post behind him. There was no time for words, only survival. Far above the battlefield, dark clouds rolled across the mountain. Thunder echoed in the distance. The final battle had begun. Gunfire echoed through the mountains. Smoke covered the monastery courtyard. The first light of dawn slowly appeared beyond the distant hills. Elias and Ethan fought side by side. After 10 long years, they were finally together again. Neither of them intended to lose the other. Sarah and Cole defended the monastery entrance. Daniel and Blackwood held the center of the courtyard, against wave after wave of Iron Circle soldiers. Jacob climbed onto the old bell tower. He raised a rifle and carefully watched the battlefield below. The commander walked through the smoke with calm confidence. His revolvers were empty. He threw them aside. Then he drew a long combat knife. He looked directly at Elias. No more armies. No more lies. Just you and me. Elias handed his rifle to Ethan. He drew his own knife. The two men slowly circled each other. Everything around them seemed to disappear. The battle, the shouting, the gunfire. Only one fight mattered now. The commander attacked first. His knife moved with incredible speed. Elias blocked the strike and forced him backward. The commander smiled. You have become stronger. Elias answered with another attack. This is for my wife. The commander avoided the blow. Elias attacked again. This is for Red Hollow. The commander stumbled. Elias struck once more. This is for every family you destroyed. The commander fell to one knee. He tried to stand. Before he could move, Ethan rushed forward and kicked the knife from his hand. The weapon slid across the stone floor. The commander looked at Ethan. You should have joined me. Ethan shook his head. I already chose my family. At that moment, another shot echoed across the courtyard. Jacob had fired from the bell tower. The bullet struck the commander's shoulder. He collapsed onto the cold stone. The remaining Iron Circle soldiers lowered their weapons. They looked at one another in silence. Their leader had fallen. Blackwood stepped forward. It is over. Throw down your weapons. One by one, the soldiers obeyed. The war that had lasted for decades finally came to an end. As the morning sun rose above Eagle Peak, the smoke slowly cleared. Families embraced one another. Prisoners walked free. The black flags of the Iron Circle were lowered forever. Days later, the people of Ash Creek gathered outside the small church where the story had begun. The old bell rang across the quiet town. Sheriff Graves welcomed the survivors home. The names of the innocent were finally cleared. The truth hidden for so many years was revealed. The records from the fortress helped reunite lost families across the frontier. Blackwood accepted responsibility for every mistake he had made. He surrendered peacefully and promised to spend the rest of his life helping repair the damage he had caused. Jacob finally met his daughter after many years apart. Cole embraced his grandfather with tears in his eyes. Daniel chose to rebuild the Frontier Marshal service with honesty instead of fear. Sarah reopened her father's ranch and turned it into a safe place for families who had lost everything. Ethan remained beside Elias. Father and son slowly rebuilt the years they had lost. Some memories could never be replaced, but new memories could still be made. On a quiet morning, Elias stood outside his small cabin. He removed his old Marshal badge and looked at it one last time. Then he placed it inside a wooden box beside the small carved horse he had made for Ethan many years before. His life as a lawman had ended. His life as a father had finally begun. As the sun rose over the mountains, peace returned to the frontier. For the first time in 10 years, Elias smiled.